What's up, good people? I hope you guys are well. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Coach Susan and I'm very happy to have you on here for another episode of Finance Friday. Now, Treasury bills and bonds are hot. They are one of the most lucrative ways to invest your money in Kenya right now. And so I thought for today's episode, I'd like to give you a crash course on what exactly Treasury bills and bonds are and everything you need to know before you can get started or before you can start investing in them. If this is something you've been keen on and you've been wanting to learn about, you might want to stick around till the end. So I need this to be very short and sweet. My goal is for you to know everything you need to know in the next few minutes about investing in Treasury bills and bonds. Now, I'm going to start with a disclaimer. We are going to be saying a bit of technical stuff, not hard stuff, you can understand them, but it's going to get a bit technical because I'm going to be talking things like interest rates and taxes. So if you have your notebook close by, I would highly recommend that you watch this video with a notebook. And of course, grab your cup of tea or coffee or whatever makes you happy. And hopefully stick around until the end. Now, the first thing that you need to understand is what exactly Treasury bills and bonds are. I know we all hear people saying, I want to invest in bills or I'm investing in bills and bonds. But like when you ask someone, what are those? Like what are bills and bonds? I've gotten the funniest answers ever because some people tell me, hizo si ni zile zinakuanga za gava, but nini exactly? What exactly are they? So Treasury bills and bonds are what we refer to as government debt securities, okay? Let me explain this in layman language. If I, Susan, lend you 1 million shillings, okay? Yeah, I'm that rich. Amen? So if I lent you 1 million and I told you you can pay it back to me, but like with an interest rate of 12% or 10%, in this case, I've made money. It was an investment for me to loan you that money because I gave you 1 million and when you give it back to me, you're going to give it back as 1 million plus the 10% interest or 12% interest that we've agreed on. Now, that's exactly what government bills and bonds are. We loan money to the government, okay, so that they can be able to either supplement the public expenditure budget or even do some infrastructural work in the country. And once they are done doing those projects, they give us back our money, but they pay us back with an interest. That is where the investment opportunity is. Now, obviously, because the government cannot come to me directly as Susan, there's an intermediary that handles Treasury bills and bonds, and that is the Central Bank of Kenya. So all of these offerings, or rather the whole transaction between you as an individual lending money to the government and then the government paying you back after a set period of time, then we do all that through the Central Bank of Kenya, which handles all Treasury issues. Now, the second thing you want to also know is what is the difference between Treasury bills and Treasury bonds. Now, there are quite a number of differences. However, the major one and the most important one to know at this particular point is that the biggest difference between them are that Treasury bills are short-term while bonds are long-term. So when we say short-term, we mean anything below 1 year. So bills, you will invest for a maximum of 1 year. However, for the Treasury bonds, they can range anything between 2 to 30 years. So you can get like a 4-year bond, a 10-year bond, an 18-year bond, heck, even a 25-year bond. So they are pretty long-term, and that is like the two major differences between those two. Now that we know the biggest differences between Treasury bills and bonds, I'd like to take some time to talk about the first category, which is the Treasury bills. Now, we already said that Treasury bills are short-term, so they come in 3 tenors, okay? So we have a 91-day Treasury bill, we have a 182-day Treasury bill, and then we have a 364-day Treasury bill. So in other words, if you want to invest in a bill, you choose between these 3 periods, or what we are calling tenors, okay? Now, you can invest either for, 3 months, 6 months, or 12 months. And they actually are retailing almost on a weekly basis. So most times, I don't want to use a lot of jargon, but like even when you look at the Central Bank of Kenya website, this retailing of treasury bills is usually referred to as auction. Like when there's an active auction or an open auction, it means that the treasury bills are usually, like, we have new treasury bills every week. So there's very many opportunities. If you missed treasury bills from last week and the auction closed, you can always invest treasury bills for this week or next week. So the opportunities are there on a weekly basis. Now, minimum amount that you need to invest in treasury bills is 100,000 Kenya shillings if you're investing in Kenya. So again, that's where you start from, okay? So sometimes I've actually logged into the portal, and you find that you will find like a bill. I've actually seen a bill that you can invest like from 50,000 some couple of weeks ago. I don't know whether things are now changing, that they are now allowing people to invest with even 50,000, but like from rather traditionally, it has been that the bare minimum amount is 100,000 per investment. So you can always do more, okay? And you do that in denominations of like 50,000 each. So you can do 100,000, 150,000, 200,000, 250, up to 1 million, or however many millions you have. We're just saying that the bare minimum, to be safe, just work with a bare minimum of 100,000. Now, let's talk returns, because I'm pretty sure you guys want to know, how am I making money? Right now, treasury bills are doing very, very well. Sometime maybe a year ago or 2 years ago, they were probably giving interest rates of like 12, 13, 14%. But now, as we speak, the bills are very, very lucrative. Obviously, because the government needs money. And so, of course, they've made them a bit more attractive by increasing the interest rate. And we are seeing now interest rates of up to 15 or 16% per annum. And guys, this per annum part is very, very important, because sometimes when you're calculating your interest rate, like for 91 days, 182 days, some of us tend to get confused in terms of like, am I getting 16% after 91 days, or what do you mean? No, 16% means per annum. So if you remember your math in high school, like 91 days is a 3 out of 360, or rather it is 91 days out of 364 days in a year. So when you're calculating your interest, don't use 1 year. Of course, we calculate like, let's say, principal times rate times time. A very simple way of calculating basic interest is principal, what you put in, times the rate, which is 16%, times time, which is 1 year. But if you didn't put your money for 1 year, you probably put it for 91 days. You want to calculate what that looks like. So the 16% is per annum if you leave your money invested for a year, okay? Now, they are also sold at a discount. And maybe without me talking so much about this, I would like to actually show you exactly what I mean on an actual practical example, what we mean when we say that treasury bills are actually sold at a discount. So let's look at that briefly. So we are now on the CBK website. I just Googled Central Bank of Kenya. This is the website. Now, if you want to familiarize yourself with treasury bills and bonds, all you have to come here is come here onto the invest part, as you can see, and then select securities. Then you can actually be able to look at treasury bills and treasury bonds. For this particular illustration, we are looking at treasury bills. And you can see after I've clicked there, there's a lot of information that you can get. This is one of the reading assignments I always give my clients, just so that you can familiarize yourself with treasury bills, what they are. You can see that there's this definition here, that they are secure short-term investments that offer you returns after a relatively short commitment of funds. You can see actually here some of the features. They're secure, they're short-term, they have attractive interest rates, they're auctioned weekly. And then here we have a step-by-step guide on how you can actually apply or start investing. And this is very good information to get. You can see how you open an account, either via the web portal or the mobile app. And then, of course, we have the step-by-step guide here. So I'd really recommend, I'm going to leave this link in the description box so that you guys can take a look at it. Now, we want to discuss the fact that Treasury bills are sold at a discount. Again, I've just clicked on more. And once you see the Treasury bills on offer here, you can see the average interest rates per annum for the 91-day, 182, 364 days. You need to be aware that these particular interest rates are per annum. So if you're going to be doing the 182-day, you need to know that this interest is for the whole year, not the entire 182. However, the calculator that I wanted to show you is down here, where you'll find what we call a Treasury bill pricing calculator. Now, this calculator is just an estimate. I'm just using it to show you a good example of ideally what you would be looking at if you were to apply for a Treasury bill and what being sold at a discount means. So you can see they've said that this calculator allows you to determine what your payment would be based on face values and interest rates that you input. So your face value ideally is like how much money you want to invest, right? And you can use this calculator to determine what your returns would be at various interest rates. Or if you'd like to enter a competitive bid, you can determine what interest rate you want to submit to the CPK. So let me show you a good example. Let's assume I want to invest 100,000. Okay. Obviously, we said Treasury bills are taxed, and let's say the interest rate I'm looking at is maybe 15%, and I want to invest this for, let's say, 1 year, which is 364 days. So obviously, you don't have all these other details. You probably don't know the price, the tax amount, the total offer. You just know that you have 100,000, and of course, because it's a bill, it's taxed, and the rate you're dealing with is maybe 15%, and you want to invest either for 91, 182 or 364 days. Once you've provided this information, all you have to do is just press calculate. You can see after I've pressed calculate, the numbers have just auto-filled themselves. And what you're probably looking at, for example, is like what the tax amount will be and the total payment offer. Now, this is what I meant when I said that Treasury bills are sold at a discount. Now, this total offer payment ideally means that if this Treasury bill you were to invest in it, you would ideally invest roughly around 88,939.8. As a result, after the 1 year, you would get your face value paid back to you. In other words, you would now get 100,000 at the end of the investment period. So like they usually sell it at a discount. In other words, you should have put 100,000, but instead you put 89,939. And then after the 364-day period is over, your interest amount, you earn an interest of maybe 11,060.2. So that finally, at the end of 1 year, you'll be paid your face value, which is 100,000. Okay, so the amount you will invest is around 88 at the beginning of the year, but like towards the end of the year, ideally we are looking at 100,000. You can always play around. If you want to invest 500,000, again, maybe it is with tax, same duration, you can just calculate. Obviously, as I told you guys, the more money you have, the more some of these investments make sense. So you see, like this person would ideally have invested 444,000, and then they will earn an interest of 55,000. So at the end of the 364-day period, they will be paid the face value, which is 500K. So that's what I meant by Treasury bills are sold at a discount. So I'd encourage you, please come and play around with this calculator and read more on the website, just so that you can understand better how the Treasury bills work. So from our previous example, you probably had or you saw me adding a bit of tax on the calculation. And this is also something that is very, very important to note down, that your investments in Kenya generally, the investment returns are normally or will usually be taxed at around 15% withholding tax. So they're not taxing the full amount that you invested, they're taxing the amount of money that you made from that investment. So it's important to also have that in mind. Now, let's talk about withdrawing. Let's say you've bought a bill and you maybe bought it for like 1 year, but the 1 year is not over and you would like to withdraw or recoup your money. Now, the CBK has made this quite difficult to do because they want to actually discourage people haphazardly investing and then divesting or removing their money from the investment before the period is due. So, but at the worst case scenario, like as a last resort, you can always do what they call rediscounting your bill. So in other words, it's like you sell it back to the government, but it's gonna be at a loss. Okay, so like it's going to cost you something to recover your money back. So I've always said, if you're gonna lock your money for either 91, 182, or 364 days, please make sure that you've done proper planning around you being able to leave that money invested for the duration that you've actually chosen. Because withdrawing before time or rediscounting your bills before time will have you lose a bit of money because you're going to actually sell it back to the government, but you're going to make some losses. And they do this so that they can actually discourage people from randomly just putting it and removing as if this is a bank account. Now, finally, Treasury bills are best for short-term capital preservation. As you can see, you can lock your money for either 91, 182, or 364 days. Or 364 days. So you're able to kind of like lock your money for the short term and still maximize on good returns. So if you're interested in like just wetting your feet a little bit, you're like you want, and this is actually a very, very good way to keep your money. If you want to do something outside of money market funds. So let's assume you've already been doing money market funds, you have your emergency funds, you have your sinking funds, you're probably getting your 12, 11% in a money market fund, and you've been wondering, where else can I put money in the short term so that I can, take advantage of better returns or higher returns? So you see a money market fund will give you, let's say, 12% per annum on your savings. However, a treasury bill will give you 16%. So that's also something that you can consider for the short term, either 91, 182, or 364 days. So I'd highly, highly recommend that for short-term capital preservation, but also maximizing on the return on your savings in the short term. Okay? Now that we know a little bit about bills, let's talk about my favorites. I love bonds. Now, we had already mentioned the duration of bonds is much longer term. Anything between 2 to 30 years. As I told you guys, depending on what is retailing or what is auctioning, you might find that this month we have a 14-year bond. Next month we have a 5-year bond. Maybe the other month we have a 7-year bond, but they range between 2 to around 30 years. Now, we have two major types of bonds. We have quite a number of like smaller categories, but I'd like to focus on the two major types of bonds that we have. We have what we call the normal bond. When you're looking on this CBK website, you will notice that they are usually denominated as FXD, which means fixed deposit bonds, okay? And then we have the infrastructural bond, which is usually denominated by IFB, which obviously means infrastructural bonds. What is the difference between these two? Quite a number of differences. Number one, the fixed deposits, or rather the normal bonds, are usually used to supplement the public expenditure budget. So these normal bonds usually finance like the day-to-day activities of the government, of running the country and all that. However, even by the name IFBs, infrastructural bonds, they are usually used by the government. The money they collect is used to build infrastructure. So the IFBs are usually for infrastructural purposes only. So that's difference number one. Difference number two comes in the amount of money that you are required to have to invest in either one of them. For the normal bonds or for the FXDs, the minimum amount is 50,000. However, for the infrastructural bonds, the IFBs, the minimum investment amount is 100,000 Kenya shillings. All right. The third difference, and this is the most exciting, is the normal bonds are taxed just the same way as like the bills at 15% withholding tax. However, the infrastructural bond returns are usually tax-free, which is one of the reasons why the infrastructural bonds are like the most lucrative. Like when Kenyans hear there's an infrastructural bond, we are excited because you're going to put your money in an investment. get your 18% per annum, and all of it is yours. None of it is going to taxes, if at all you're lucky to get an infrastructural bond. Okay, now something I'd like to mention when it comes to taxes. Now, as I mentioned, most investments are taxed at 15% withholding tax. However, when it comes to bonds, one of the things I've noticed is that longer term bonds are taxed less than short-term bonds. So you will find like short-term bonds of up to, let's say, 9 or 10 years are taxed at 15% withholding tax. That is tax that is effected on your interest income. However, the more longer-term bonds, like bonds that are 10 years onwards, you'll sometimes find that they are actually taxed at 10% withholding tax. Generally, this is a rule of thumb. Even outside of the bills and bonds, any investment that is short-term is most probably going to be taxed more than investments that are longer-term. So you'll find that longer-term bonds are taxed less. You'll even notice that longer-term investments like your pension fund or your retirement investments also have some level of like tax advantages because they are a bit more long-term. The same way things like long-term life insurances also have some tax advantages, all right? So that's something that you need to note. Now, let us talk about withdrawal, okay? So we said in the bills, if you want to withdraw your money, the only option that you have is to rediscount your bill and sell it back to the government, and most times you're probably going to incur some sort of a loss or fees because of doing that. So they do that so that they can actually discourage that kind of behavior. Now, for the bonds, there are two ways you can also, or rather there's one way that you can get rid of your bonds, and that is called selling them in the secondary market. Ideally, what most of us will do, especially if you're investing directly through the CBK, you've bought bonds in what we call the primary market. Now, guys, I told you this is going to be a masterclass. So at this particular point, and if you're already listening to me and you're like, Coach Susan, stop. What is primary market? What is secondary market? What are you talking about? Please note that down. That's why we had a notebook, okay? Note it down. Google is your friend. Just Google what's the difference between the primary market and the secondary market. But just to summarize, the primary market is the initial market where a bill or a bond or a security is offered. And then the secondary market is where you sell through brokers. Now, brokers in this case could be like investment firms or even some of our banks. Most of our banks also act as brokers. I also know people who initially have bought bonds through their banks. So instead of you going directly to the Central Bank of Kenya, you've used your bank like Stanchart or KCB or NCBA, whichever bank you use, and you use them to be able to purchase your bills. Now, can I let you guys in on a little secret? And I know it's not a secret, but some of you might probably not be aware. Let's talk about this blouse I'm wearing. Let's say I had two choices. I had the choice of going to, let's say, Isili to buy this top. And maybe in Isili, I'd have bought it for like, I don't know, maybe 500 bob, okay? Because I've gone, and you guys, if you've been to Isili or the markets, you know it's hectic, it's a hassle, but I went and bought it for myself. So I bought it at 500. Now, imagine I do not want the inconvenience and the hassle of going to Isili to buy my blouse. I want to just go to the CBD in town and be able to get it. So I walk into a shop at Biashara Street and I still get the same top, only that this time around, it's not selling for 500 bob, it's selling for 1200. Why is the same blouse costing me more money? It's because someone else has gone and done the work for me. They spent their labor, energy, they spent money, transport, and their time to go source for this and to place it in a shop that is very convenient in CBD. They're paying rent for that shop, etc. And because I prefer convenience, obviously, I want to just walk in and out of a shop with a blouse, so I'm going to pay more for it. And that is the same concept with, or the biggest difference between buying bonds through the CBK or buying bonds through your bank. When you go directly to the CBK, ideally you've gone to Isili, okay? You've gone to the market yourself. And that is what we are saying, is the primary market. So you've hustled, you went and struggled to open the account, and you submitted your documents, the KRA PIN certificate, the ID, everything. You did the bidding yourself. You waited for the auction results. You called your bank to help you transfer the money. You've done all the work. However, you can also choose the option of convenience where you just call your bank, Standard Chartered or KCB, or again, whichever bank you use, and tell them, I want, maybe on the bank app, or you already know that there are some bonds or bills that are retailing. You can ask them to invest or do that transaction on your behalf. However, you need to know that if you do that, there is definitely a cost for it, because there's no free convenience. We always pay for convenience. So you're probably going to end up paying some transaction fees, some management fees, or some brokerage fees for them to actually be able to do that for you on your behalf. So I feel like it's kind of like it's going to shave off a little bit of your return, because they also have to keep some money for the purposes of, catering to their brokerage needs and all of that. Okay? Now, if you want to, again, as I said, withdraw before the period is over, you've invested for, maybe you put your money for 10 years, but then now you need to withdraw the money. You're going to have to go back to the secondary market, to your broker, and tell them, I don't want to keep this bond until it's over. I'd like to sell it right now. And then they will look at the prevailing market prices. Unfortunately, if the bond prices have gone lower than from the time you bought, then, depending on the price fluctuations, you can either redeem that bond or withdraw that bond either at a profit or at a loss, just depending on the prices of where they are, okay? And maybe one last thing to also mention before we look at how bonds make you passive income is that another very interesting thing about bonds is that you can actually use them as collateral for loans, okay? But you want to be careful about that. So you can take out a credit facility or a loan facility. And if you have quite an amount of money in a bond, a long-term bond, you can actually use that as collateral or for security of a bond. Obviously, I'll remind you, you want to make sure that this bond, or rather this loan, is a good debt. It's money that's helping you either increase your income or expand your wealth. We said on this channel, we are living the behavior of bad debt last year, okay? So please don't take out some of these loans to do lifestyle things that you can wait for or can save up for. But yeah, that's another exciting thing about bonds. Now, that was a mouthful. I would like to show you an actual practical example of how bonds are used for passive income, because we said that treasury bills are best used for short-term capital preservation and maximizing on short-term returns. However, for the bonds, they are best used for making passive income. And I'd like to show you just a very quick example of how we actually make passive income from bonds. So let's look at that. So we want to look at a practical example of how much passive income you would make in a bond. So today I want us to maybe look at two different types of bonds. So we talked about the normal bond, which is usually denominated as FXD, and we are saying that this one is subject to tax, okay? And then we also want to have, let's say, an infrastructural bond, which is denominated as IFB, and this one is usually tax-free, okay? So let's assume that the return of this investment is actually, so most bonds right now are retailing between 17% to maybe 19%. So I want to work with maybe like a conservative amount. So let's even make it 16% per annum. So let's assume the bond is paying you 16% per annum. For the purpose of this calculation, I just want to convert that to decimal. So that would mean we are working with 0.16. 0.16 is just 16%. So let me just mark that. Now, let's work with three examples of someone who has invested, let's say, the bare minimum, which is 50,000. And then we have someone who's maybe invested 250,000. And then we have maybe someone who's invested 800,000. And then maybe we have someone who has quite a bit of money and they have invested, let's say, 4 million. All right. So we want to actually now run numbers and see what exactly that would look like. So this is your initial investment. Now, remember we said that bonds pay you on a semi-annual basis. Okay. This one is a semi-annual basis. So every 6 months, you're paid your interest. Now, for someone who has 50,000 in this kind of a bond, the calculation would look something like 16% of 50,000 that they have invested. And of course, that is per year, but we divide by 2 to see how much they would get semi-annually. Okay, so this one is a semi-annual return. So this is ideally how much this person would be looking at. Now, if it is again for 250,000, we want it 16% per annum of the investment, which is 200. That's what they make per year, but then we divide by 2 because you're paid twice in a year. So that would be 20,000. If someone has 800,000, again in the same bond, because they have more money, they would make 16% of 800,000 per year. And then, of course, we divide by 2 to get how much they would get every 6 months. Okay. And then, of course, for someone who has 4 million, that is 16% of 4 million. All right. And this is how much they would get in terms of a semi-annual return. All right. Now, there's something I need you to realize here. And this is one of the reasons why I used this normal bond versus infrastructural bond. So every 6 months, this person is going to be getting 4,000. So let's assume that this bond is 16% and maybe it is a 7-year bond. Okay. So what this means is that for the next 7 years, all right, for the next 7 years, this person is going to get 4,000 every 6 months, 4,000 every 6 months until the 7-year period is over. Once the 7-year period is over, this is now what was the face value, which is now like the capital invested. Okay. So this is ideally the capital that this person would have invested. This is what we are calling capital invested. And for this person, ideally, this is how much they would have put in the investment. Now, every 6 months, for example, for this person who has put 50,000, you will see that they'll get 6 months, every 6 months, 4,000 until the end of the 7-year period. Once the 7 year is over, the government pays you back your face value or the capital that you invested. Now, as you guys can see, these people's experience is so different. For someone who has 50K, they might think that 4,000 for every 6 months is quite kidogo money or little money. But then you see the more money you add, now for someone who has 250K, the semi-annual return or the passive income you get every 6 months is actually quite good. And the more you add, the more it makes sense. Now, remember, we've not taken into account tax. So this one is if it is an infrastructural bond that is tax-free. In other words, the return that you're actually making is tax-free. If it was a normal bond, your semi-annual return, okay, in the sense of like, this one now is an FXD, which is what we call a normal bond. And these normal bonds are usually taxed at around 15%, withholding tax. So here we are talking about, this one is, let me just rename this. So we have FXD, and the tax is actually 15%. Let's say this is a 15% withholding tax. Okay. Now, if the government is keeping 15% as tax, in other words, this person would not get this full 4,000. They would get 100% minus 15%, which is 85%. So instead of getting the full amount, you would only get 85% of this amount. So that's the return that person would get. For this one, that is the return they would get, 85% of that. For this person, they would get maybe around 85% of this much. And then for this person, they would get 85% of what they got. So in other words, this is the biggest difference between for an infrastructural bond, you get 4,000 every 6 months. For a normal bond, that amount will be less tax. So now it will be 3,400. So it's not a very big difference, but like you can clearly tell where when you get an infrastructural bond, of course, your return is higher because the returns are not taxed. But if it's just a normal bond, it's not like the returns are bad. It's just that they are net of tax. So this is just an estimate or an example of what your returns would look like, or passive income in a bond. And the goal is for you to say, of course, the more money you have, the more these returns make sense every 6 months. So I really hope that made sense. Let me know if you've understood in the comment section. Now that we know what treasury bills and bonds are and all the tiny little details that are important for you to know as a beginner, maybe in conclusion, we need to talk about how you actually open an account. Now, as I said, there are 2 options. You can go through directly through the CBK, or you can use your bank as a broker. And just previously, I mentioned the pros and cons. Of course, when you go directly through the CBK, there's a bit of, as I said, hassle and work that you need to, or things that you need to know how to do for yourself. But your entire amount of return remains yours because you don't have to pay extra charges or extra fee to have someone else do it for you. Or you can go with option B, where you open an account through your bank, and your bank now acts as a broker, and then of course you will be paying them that brokerage fee or management fees for them to manage this investment for you or to do some of these transactions for you. Now, before maybe last year, the whole entire process of going directly through the CBK was a pain. Like, it was a nightmare. Going to the Central Bank of Kenya, we required to download some forms from the website, fill the forms, and then go, queue in the Central Bank of Kenya, any one of the Central Bank of Kenya branches, and then of course wait for the process to be done, maybe in about 7 to 14 working days. If you are in diaspora, if you're Kenyan living in diaspora, it was even worse. As much as you were filling in the form, it was very difficult to open an account if you're not physically in the country. They would require you to mail the actual filled forms to your bank, and then for your bank to sign and stamp, and then for them to forward it to the Central Bank of Kenya. It was a long process, guys. But now there is an online portal on the CBK website. It's called the DO CSD account. I'm going to put it up on the screen right now. So on the CBK website, again, this is where you access the DO CSD self-registration portal. All you have to do is just come here, click invest, and then you can select the DO CSD portal. So we are going to just click there, and you can see that now you're on the portal. Of course, if you're new and you've never had a CDS account, which is ideally the account you need to be able to buy bills and bonds, you just come on here and create a new account, okay? So you just enter your email, your username of choice, your password, and then of course accept the legal terms. Then you can start your registration process, fill in the necessary data. Or if you already had an old account, because before CBK launched this online portal, they used to have a manual system where you'd go arrange or panga line pale kwa the banks, and then you open an account. So if your account hasn't been transferred onto the portal, all you have to do again is just say, I already have a CSD account, enter the email you used to register, and then of course after that they will assist you, guide you through on your email through how, or rather you wait a few days for your account to actually be moved, your old account to be moved to the new portal. So you can come on here and check this. So all we are saying is that you either have an option to use your bank as a broker or a brokerage firm to be doing this for you, but now because the CBK has brought it to our laptops and our phones, you can actually just do it by yourself or for yourself on the platform, and you can always reach out to them in case you're having challenges or you don't understand what to fill as you do your application. And the DO CSD account ideally is where now you can actually start investing in treasury bills and bonds. And you really do not have to be in the country. As long as you're a Kenyan, you have a Kenyan ID, you have a Kenyan KRA PIN certificate, you have your passport photo, you have your Kenyan bank account, the normal KYC documents. please, as long as you have that, you can just open an account. Now, as you can see, you're able to just go onto the website and then, of course, say if you want to create a new account. If you don't want to create a new account, you already had an existing one, you can just transfer the existing one there. The process is quite straightforward. Once you've actually opened the account, it takes around, again, 7 to 14 working days on the maximum for your account to be active. And from that point onwards, you can begin investing with through the Central Bank of Kenya, through Treasury Bills and Treasury Bonds. Now, today I've taken you through a short crash course of everything that you need to know. However, a disclaimer that I'd like to give is that once you're going through the CBK, if your bank is not handling this for you, one of the things that you need to learn and to practice or be taught is, number one, the bidding process, because there's how you apply for the bond or for the bill, which is called bidding. And that is one of the services that I offer as a personal finance coach. On top of that, there's also very many different strategies that you can use to maximize on some of the returns that you can make. Like in bonds, we do layering or lagering, where you can stack up quite a number of bonds so that you can have passive income coming in maybe even the entire year, every month of the year. And all of those strategies, again, are some of the things that we do in our one-on-one consultation sessions or coaching sessions when it comes to bills and bonds. Now, if today's video was exciting for you and you are very intentional, you have the money, you would like to start investing, but you want to take some time to learn the different investment strategies that you can use in Treasury Bills and bonds, or learn the different how you actually do the bidding on the website, how you bid for a bill or a bond. I have a few slots open for my consultation sessions, the 90 minutes virtual Pick My Brain sessions. And I'd really, really love to host a few of you who are very interested in that, so that I can take you through the process of some of the different different strategies that you can use to invest in bonds, and even how you do the bidding process. If you are interested in that, I'm gonna leave a link down below for you to book that session with me, and I'd be happy to guide you through the same. I really hope you've enjoyed today's video. It was a crash course. It's been a mouthful, but I know you guys are smart people. You've probably gotten quite a bit from it. Let me know what your key takeaway was. If you have any questions, you guys know what to do in the comment section. Share this video with your friends so that people are not saying, I don't know what bills are, what bonds are. Now we know what they are and how they work. So thank you so much for watching today's video. Remember to subscribe if you haven't already subscribed, and also turn on the notification bell so that you can be notified every time I upload a new video. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next Friday.